branding. I'm super excited to have each and every one of you join me today for this very special training. We have 20 minutes, oh my gosh, 20 minutes of power together. I sort of look at these as power talks or power trainings, and today's training is definitely full of power. So first off, let me just say here, I want to invite you to get into a quiet space where you can minimize your distractions. I want you to grab your notebook, grab your paper so that you can take copious notes. I tend to give very practical insights that you can implement immediately to take your brand to the next level, so you don't want to miss out on those. Now that we have that out of the way, I want to take a moment to introduce myself to those of you who are new to me. My name is Ty Miles. I am a business and brand strategist. I have the extreme pleasure of working with purpose-driven female leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs, and I help them reach their target audience and stand out in their respective industries so that they can create meaningful impact and make great money at the same time. Does that sound like you? If that sounds like you are in the absolute right space. I also want to note that I not only come to you as an expert as it relates to branding and personal branding and marketing communications, but I also come to you as an individual who sits on the board of two very special, and they're special to me, nonprofits. These two nonprofits, one centers around the community I grew up in, West End, inside of Birmingham, Alabama. That particular nonprofit, we have a pay-as-you-can cafe, a pay-as-you-can daycare. We also have a community garden. On the other nonprofit is centered around ending pediatric cancer. So two very special causes. And I'll tell you this, most of our board meetings are centered around how are we going to raise money? How can we energize our donors? How can we energize our volunteers? How can we really get our strategic partners involved in our fundraising efforts? Does this sound familiar to any of you? It should, because fundraising is a huge part of what we do as nonprofits, right? It's how we get stuff done. It is how we move our mission forward. It takes money. And that's one thing that I would say that most of us can agree on, is that when it comes to building and running a profitable nonprofit, resources oftentimes are limited, right? So because resources are limited, it negatively, or it can negatively impact how much impact we want to make. And when you're passionate about something, you want to make as much impact as possible. And I'm here to tell you from experience that branding sits at the heart of really getting your message, your mission out there in the world so that people can be inspired to get involved. And so that's why today's training is so important. You know, like I know, that nonprofit work is combined of two types of work. On the one side is heart work. As I said, this is, you're part of your nonprofit because it's something that you're passionate about. Maybe you have personally experienced it, or maybe you know someone close to you that has experienced it, or maybe you just may be a fierce advocate for the transformation and the mission of your particular nonprofit. Doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum, it is hard work. You're motivated because you want to make a difference, because you're passionate about what you do. It takes a lot of grit. It takes a lot of grind. It takes a lot of hard work. Oftentimes hard work that you are putting in and you're not being paid from it, right? On the other side, it is hard work, H-A-R-D. It is hard work to build a profitable nonprofit. Right? So how do you go beyond, just making ends meet, right? How do you really develop your nonprofit organization to the point where you have generous funding coming in, so that not only you have the money that you need in order to move your mission forward, but you also can, afford to have salaried members on your staff, right? How many of you are ready for that? And if you're ready for that, again, you're in the right place today, because branding is at the heart of doing three very powerful things for your for your brand. Branding is going to allow your nonprofit to raise more dollars. Branding is going to allow your nonprofit to to attract, right? And to really energize volunteers that are really aligned and passionate about the mission of your nonprofit organization. And lastly, branding is going to allow you to really create a sense of community among your team, among your donors, your strategic partners. It's going to allow you to create that sense of community that really gives everybody involved this just high sense of pride, right? And they just want to share it to the world. And we know the more you can share it out to the world, the more people you can impress with what you're doing, and the more people ultimately you can have, really buy in, emotionally connect, and donate and support your nonprofit. So let's talk about this. Let's start here for a moment with what branding is. And when we talk about what branding is, I really want to start with talking about what branding is not. Oftentimes when I ask the question, what branding is, two things that I hear more than anything else is branding is your logo and branding are your colors. And I'm here to say that branding is neither of those. Now, your logo is a brand asset that is critically important to your brand presence and brand congruence. Your logo is going to go on everything that is related to your nonprofit, from your marketing materials to your website, to t-shirts, to products. Your logo will be on everything, and it's going to help you really develop that strong brand presence. And then you have your colors. Now, your colors are another brand asset. It also allows you to create brand presence, right? And brand congruence and brand recognition. When people see your colors and your logo together, they're going to know exactly who you are. And that's what you want. So while these are great assets for your nonprofit, they are not how you brand your nonprofit. So what is branding? Branding in its most simplest definition is what people think about you based on what they know about you. Branding is what people think about you based on what they know about you. So when your audience engages with your brand, doesn't matter if it's online or in person, how do you make them feel? What are they thinking about your brand when they read the article you posted, when they read the post where you invited them to donate? What type of feelings is your content evoking in your audience? That's what real branding is. Branding is how someone thinks about you. And so if you have 1,000 people in your audience, you have 1,000 perceptions of your brand, meaning you have 1,000 little brands out there, right? So it can get crazy if you're inconsistent with your content, inconsistent in how you're showing up. Because now you're, in essence, you have 1,000 mixed up random brands that do not really support the one goal that you want them to, be focused on. So that's why strong nonprofit branding is so critically important, because no matter who engages your brand, you want all 1,000 of those people thinking the same thing, feeling the same way. And your branding gives you the power to predetermine how your content, how your colors, how your website, how your events, how every single aspect of your brand makes your ideal client, ideal customer, ideal donor feel. And so I'm going to walk you through some first steps so that you can create the foundation of a strong nonprofit brand. So let's talk about this. I have my notes here because I want to make sure that we stay on point with everything that we're covering today. And I want to make sure that I give it all to you. So the first step, write this down. The first step of developing a strong nonprofit brand is your vision and your mission. Your vision and your mission. I like to say that your vision is the destination, right? It is aspirational. It is your ultimate hope. So if I ask the question this way, I would say, what solution does your nonprofit exist to solve? What problem does your nonprofit organization exist to solve? So what is your solution, right? What is the solution that your nonprofit makes, right? That has to do with your vision, right? Your vision is aspirational. And then on the other side of that, we have your mission. Your mission is like the directions. It's the day-to-day things. It's the events. It's the services that you provide in order to fulfill your ultimate vision. Step number 2, donor clarity. Donor clarity. You need to know who your ideal donor is. Who's your dream donor? What does your dream donor look like? And so this is so important because at the end of the day, the goal with donor clarity is, again, I'm going to echo this, emotional connection, but not any kind of emotional connection. The goal is to know your donor so well that you can create content, you can share stories, you can make powerful invitations that emotionally connect with them based off something that they have a personal experience around. Again, with my other nonprofit, which is the one centered in West End, where we have the Pay As You Can Cafe and we have the Pay As You Can daycare. That is rooted in, it's the emotional connection there because it's the community that I grew up in as a child. So the emotional connection made donating to that organization. It makes volunteering with the organization. It makes sitting on the board of directors for that organization. It makes it a personal preference for me. So it's an emotional connection rooted in personal preference. This is the power of knowing exactly who your donor is. And so let's talk about some questions that you and your board of directors or your team can brainstorm around in order to get clear on, who your donor is. And so, the first questions, I'm going to just kind of round off a few of them here is, how old is your dream donor? Where does your dream donor live? Why do your dream donor care about your work? What stops your dream donor from donating money? Right? Why do your dream donor care about your work? These are some very important questions. Yeah, is your dream donor male? Is your dream donor female? Are they both? You need to know this because, you need to know if you need to appeal more to the feminine energy of women or more to the masculine energy of a man. So that's important. And if it's both, then there's a fine line that you need to walk down as it relates to the aesthetics of your brand. You don't want anything overly feminine or overly masculine. You don't want to come off too soft or too hard. It's important that you know who your donor is because at the end of the day, we want to make that emotional connection. Everything that we create, we want it to be something that appeals to them. Every single thing that you create, you want it to be something that appeals to your dream donor. But you have to know who your dream donor is in order to get to that point. So after you answer these questions, the next thing that you want to do is create donor profiles. So you might have, for your donors, you might have 3 different types of donors. So one donor may have a personal experience. Maybe they were a victim, and they have a personal experience with the mission of your organization because of a personal experience. That's one donor profile. Another donor profile, maybe they were not directly, impacted by it, but they were indirectly impacted by, some type of challenge or some type of, I would say, injustice as it relates to your nonprofit organization. Maybe someone that was close to them was impacted by it, so they were indirectly affected by it. That's a different donor profile because the reasons why they support your organization will be different from the individual who had that direct experience. And then another donor profile could be someone that just is really compassionate about humanity. So they're more compassionate, and it's not that they personally experienced it or that they really know someone who has been directly influenced by it. This is just something that is part of their passion. They just feel driven to get involved. And so that's a third donor profile. Typically, all nonprofit organizations will have each one of these three donor profiles. But I also want you to keep in mind that you can also create a profile for your volunteers. You can create a profile for your strategic partners. Who are your strategic partners, right? Ask those same questions about your strategic partners. Ask those same questions about your volunteers, right? And then at the end of the day, I would just ask that you will create some type of summary, a brief 5 to 10 sentence summary of each of these donor profiles, to include the volunteer profile and the strategic partner profile. And you want to have these profiles in mind, because now that you know what your vision and your mission is, we're going to layer on top of that your donor profile, right? So we're going to consider your donor profile. Now that you have these two things in place, it can inform all of your brand strategy. It can inform, the design of your website, the colors you choose, the logo you choose, right? It can decide, or even should, in fact, inform and decide where your nonprofit is marketed and promoted, what communities you focus your nonprofit endeavors. All of these things should be informed by your donor clarity. All right, so that's what we have for step number 2. Now for step number 3, which is so super important. Step number 3 is your brand personality. Step number 3 is your brand personality. And brand personality is super important because this is what makes your nonprofit real. This is what makes your nonprofit, keywords that I've been emphasizing over and over again, emotional connection. If your nonprofit organization was a person, how would it think? How would it act? How would it speak? How would it dress, right? These are the questions that you ask yourself when you really want to determine your brand personality. And there's 2 things that are especially important to developing a very defined brand personality. And those 2 things are your values and your voice. Your values and your voice. And so I would just say here, in terms of your voice, if I ask you the question, what are the first 3 words that come to mind if you had to describe your nonprofit as if it was a person? Would it be warm, inviting, and diplomatic? Or would it be bold and no nonsense and innovative, right? So on the one side, if it was warm and inviting and diplomatic, it would sound a certain way. It would dress, that nonprofit would dress probably more conservative, right? It would be inclusive in the language that you use to convey who you are and what you stand for and how to get involved. It would be a more inclusive approach, right? You really don't want to offend anyone, right? But you want to stand firm in what you believe in. On the flip side of that, if your brand as a person was bold and no nonsense and innovative, it may be a little more daring and outgoing. It may say some things that push the needle, right? That brand may not be as concerned with offending some people, that is totally okay, which is why you need to do this particular exercise so that you can know the tone, the voice, and the person that better understand the personality of your brand. Because once you get clear on these 3 words that describe your brand personality, you want to be consistent with that across all of your platforms. So if your brand is warm and inviting and diplomatic, it needs to be that way in person. So your team members need to be that way. Your leaders need to lead in that manner. Your website should, use language that evokes warmth, that evokes, being inviting and inclusive. It should do that, right? You should be consistent across all platforms. The images that you use should communicate warmth, inviting, and diplomatic. On the other side, if your brand is more bold and no nonsense, matter of fact, and innovative, then you would need to be that way across all platforms. You want to use innovative language. You want to maybe even use some bolder colors. You want to use more in-your-face verbiage that's going to be attractive and appealing to, an audience that, resonates with boldness, that resonates with being innovative and cutting edge, right? So you want to be really clear on which one you are. And these are just examples. So whatever your 3 words are, they're your 3 words. But wherever you show up, whether in person, online, your marketing materials, you need to be consistent across the board with that voice. Now, let's talk about values. Now, values are super important. For example, if the values for your nonprofit were accountability and transparency, I would expect that your brand would be very open in how it communicates how you spend the money for the nonprofit. I would expect that your brand would be very open with sharing the mistakes that it has made, and then the lessons that your organization have learned and how you're implementing differently in your organization to avoid that same mistake. That's just an example of, if accountability and, transparency were values for your nonprofit, which most nonprofits that I work with, those are 2 values that are really big for them. So I'm sure that may resonate with you. Another example is if valuing relationships were another value for your company, for your organization. I would expect that you would treat people with dignity and kindness and respect, no matter how they benefit you, no matter how large or how small they, work on behalf of the mission for your organization. It doesn't matter. You treat that person with dignity. You treat them with kindness. You treat them with respect. And this is across the board. If your nonprofit values relationships, this goes from the leadership. Your leadership lead with dignity and respect. It should treat your team and your volunteers with dignity and respect at all times. Because again, remember, your brand are not just words. You have to ask yourself, how do I make the values and the voice into real interactions? How do I exhibit these characteristics and these traits in the daily operations of the organization, from the founder of the nonprofit to the team members, to the volunteers, to the donors? How do I treat everybody in a way that is in true alignment with the words that we say we stand for, with who we say we are, right? And so that's so important. Branding is, at the end of the day, how people think and feel. And so you want to be consistent across the board with your brand personality. And this is not just about, writing words that sound good. It's about embodying these words and exhibiting these characteristics in such a way when people engage with you, they are saying the words that you predetermine you want your brand to represent. They are saying, based off how you treat them and how you make them feel, that this is an organization that displays accountability and transparency. This is an organization that values people over profits. That comes down to really exemplifying the words that you're writing down on your paper, not them be words that you use to describe your nonprofit, but allowing these to be words that describe who you are. Remember, these are words. If your brand was a person, if your nonprofit was a person, this is what people would say and think about that person when they engage with it. So these are the 3 ways that, again, that you can start to develop a strong nonprofit brand right now. I hope that this information has been super useful to you. I want to hear from you. I want to know, where are you in your strong nonprofit branding process? What was your biggest takeaway from today's session? And I want to hear from you. And so how do you let me know what you think? And how do you connect with me beyond today's session? You can follow me on Facebook or Instagram at the Ty Miles, at TheTymiles, or you can email me directly at ty@tymiles.com.